The CEO's son stole my login credentials and took credit for 6 months of my work. Now he's about to present his strategy to the board of directors using the fake files I've been feeding him all week. Tomorrow's reveal will be epic. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. My name is Jasmine Rivera, and for the past 4 years, I've been a senior data analyst at Meridian Tech Solutions in downtown Seattle. When I first started here, I thought I'd found my dream job. The office had those floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound, free kombucha on tap, and a mission statement about empowering innovation through collaborative excellence. I should have known that any company that uses that many buzzwords was hiding something. I wasn't always invisible here. In fact, I used to be the person everyone came to when the numbers didn't make sense, when a client presentation needed saving, or when the quarterly projections looked grim. I was the one who stayed late, who learned 3 different analytics platforms on my own time, who turned raw data into strategies that actually made the company money. Real money. Last year alone, my market segmentation analysis helped Meridian land a $3.2 million contract with a pharmaceutical company. My boss, Diane Kerrigan, called me indispensable. She said I had a future here, that I was being considered for a promotion to lead analyst. She even hinted at a corner office. I believed her. I worked harder. I took on extra projects, mentored the new hires, and volunteered for the weekend data migrations that nobody else wanted to touch. Then Cameron Holloway walked through those glass doors 6 months ago. Cameron is the founder's son. His father, Gerald Holloway, built Meridian from a 2-person startup in his garage 20 years ago. Gerald is semi-retired now, but he still holds the title of CEO and shows up for board meetings and company parties. Cameron, on the other hand, showed up with a business degree from a mid-tier school, a Rolex he constantly adjusted, and absolutely zero experience in data analytics. He got the title, Strategic Innovation Consultant. Nobody knew what that meant, including Cameron. At first, I tried to be helpful. He was assigned to shadow different departments, and when he landed in analytics for his rotation, Diane asked me to show him the ropes. Be patient with him, she said, lowering her voice. His father wants him to learn the business from the ground up. I nodded. I understood. Nepotism is a fact of corporate life. So I walked Cameron through everything. I showed him how we pulled data from our client management system, how we cross-referenced it with market trends, how we built predictive models. I even created a simplified dashboard just for him, color-coded and clearly labeled, because he kept mixing up correlation and causation. He smiled a lot. Said got it even when I could tell he didn't. Took notes on his iPad that I'm pretty sure he never looked at again. And every single time I explained something, he'd nod enthusiastically and say, "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking Meridian needs more of." I thought he was harmless. Maybe a little lazy, definitely overpaid, but harmless. I was wrong. It started small. In meetings, Cameron would repeat things I'd said earlier, almost word for word, but with more confidence and hand gestures. Diane would nod approvingly. The other analysts would glance at me, confused, but nobody said anything. Then he started CCing himself on my emails to clients, adding a single line like, "Great work, Jasmine. Let me know if you need any strategic input." As if he'd contributed anything. But the real shift happened 3 months ago during a team meeting. I presented a new client retention model I'd been developing for weeks. It was solid. It predicted churn rates with 87% accuracy and identified exactly which customer segments we were losing and why. I walked the team through every variable, every data point, every recommendation. Cameron sat in the back, nodding along, asking a few surface-level questions. At the end, Diane said it was impressive and that we'd revisit it next quarter. I went back to my desk feeling proud. 2 weeks later, Cameron presented his client retention framework to Gerald and the senior leadership team. I wasn't invited to that meeting. But I heard about it from my coworker, Riya Patel, who saw the presentation deck later. She pulled me aside in the break room, her face pale. "Jasmine," she whispered, "it's your model. Every slide. He just changed the colors and put his name on it." I felt my stomach drop. I went to Diane immediately. I showed her my original files, the timestamps, the email threads. She listened, nodded slowly, and then said the words that made my blood run cold. "I understand your frustration, but Cameron is being groomed for a leadership role here. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the good of the company. Let's not make this a bigger issue than it needs to be." That's when I realized I wasn't indispensable. I was useful. And there's a difference. I wasn't a colleague. I was a resource. A tool. And when Cameron needed to look competent in front of his father, I was the easiest one to exploit. Because who would they believe? The boss's son or the analyst who could be replaced with a job posting? I stayed quiet. I swallowed my anger. I watched as Cameron got praised for his strategic thinking. I watched as he started getting invited to leadership offsites, as his title changed from consultant to junior VP of strategy, as he moved into an office 2 doors down from his father's. And I kept working. Kept analyzing. Kept delivering. Because I needed this job. I needed the salary, the health insurance, the line on my resume. So I buried my frustration and told myself it would get better. Until last Monday, when I found out he'd been logging into my account for months. And that's when everything changed. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. Alright, let's get back to it. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Monday when I discovered the truth, and I was still at my desk because of course I was. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. The cleaning crew had already made their rounds. The only sound in the office was the hum of the server room down the hall and the occasional ping of my email notifications. I was finishing up a competitive analysis report for a potential client in the biotech sector. Meridian was pitching them later that week, and Diane had asked me to pull together market data, competitor positioning, and growth projections. Standard stuff. I'd been working on it for 3 days. I was about to save and close my laptop when I noticed something odd in my file directory. There was a folder I didn't recognize, CR_strategy_backup. The date modified showed it had been accessed that afternoon at 2:14 p.m. I frowned. I'd been in back-to-back meetings all afternoon. I hadn't touched that folder. Curious, I opened it. Inside were copies of nearly every major project I'd worked on in the past 6 months. My client retention model. My market segmentation framework. My quarterly forecasting templates. My biotech analysis draft from earlier that day. Everything. All of it neatly organized, renamed with Cameron's initials, and labeled as drafts. My hands went cold. I checked the properties on one of the files. Last modified by Cameron H_admin. He had admin access to my account. I sat there, staring at the screen, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just stealing credit anymore. This was something else entirely. He'd been inside my account. Reading my emails. Copying my files. Watching everything I did. I opened my activity log, something I'd never thought to check before. And there it was. Pages and pages of login activity from an IP address that wasn't mine. Late nights. Weekends. Times when I wasn't even in the office. He'd been accessing my account for at least 4 months. My chest tightened. I felt sick. Violated. This wasn't just corporate politics anymore. This was theft. This was sabotage. I took screenshots of everything. The folder. The file properties. The activity logs. I saved them to a USB drive I kept in my bag. Then I sat back in my chair and tried to think clearly. I could go to Diane again. But I already knew how that would go. She'd tell me it was a misunderstanding. That Cameron probably just needed reference materials. That I was overreacting. She'd already chosen her side. I could go to HR. But HR protects the company, not the employee. And the company's interests were tied directly to keeping Gerald Holloway's son happy. I could go to Gerald himself. But what would I say? Your son is stealing my work? He'd see it as a personal attack. I'd be labeled as bitter, jealous, a troublemaker. I'd be gone within a week. I felt trapped. Furious. Powerless. And then I remembered something Cameron had said during one of our early training sessions. We'd been talking about data integrity, and I'd explained how important it was to verify sources before presenting findings. He'd laughed and said, honestly, Jasmine, most executives don't check the footnotes. They just want the headline numbers and a pretty graph. That's when the idea hit me. If Cameron was going to keep stealing my work, I'd give him exactly what he wanted. But I'd make sure it was poisoned. I stayed at the office until almost midnight that night. I created a new folder in my directory called Q4_strategy_final. I made sure it was prominently placed, easy to find, with a date stamp that made it look like the most current, most important thing I was working on. Then I got to work building the fake files. I started with the biotech pitch. I took my real analysis, the one with accurate data and sound recommendations, and I created a duplicate. Then I systematically changed every number. I inflated growth projections by 40%. I misidentified the competitor landscape. I recommended a market entry strategy that would cost twice as much and target the wrong customer segment entirely. I buried obvious red flags in the appendix, things any competent analyst would catch, but that someone skimming for talking points would miss. Then I did the same thing with 3 other high-priority projects I knew Cameron had been eyeing. A client retention strategy. A pricing optimization model. A market expansion roadmap. Each one looked professional, polished, and completely legitimate on the surface. But the data underneath was a disaster. I made sure every chart was beautifully formatted. Every slide was visually stunning. Every executive summary was confident and assertive. Because I knew Cameron wouldn't dig deeper. He never did. He'd see the headlines, trust the formatting, and assume it was good because it had my name attached to it. Except, of course, my name wouldn't stay attached for long. I saved everything to the shared drive and made sure the file permissions allowed Cameron's admin account to access it. Then I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and waited. It took less than 48 hours. On Wednesday afternoon, I got an email from Diane. Subject line, big opportunity. Jasmine, Cameron has been doing some incredible strategic work lately and has really stepped up as a leader. Gerald is so impressed that he's asked Cameron to present a comprehensive growth strategy to the board next Monday. This is a huge moment for our team. I know Cameron has been learning a lot from you, so I wanted to make sure you knew how much we appreciate your support in his development. I read it 3 times. Then I smiled. He'd taken the bait. Over the next few days, I watched as Cameron paraded around the office with a new level of confidence. He had printouts of his strategy tucked under his arm. He scheduled prep meetings with Diane and Gerald. He started talking about scaling innovation and driving transformational growth. He even practiced his presentation in the main conference room with the door open so people would see him. Rhea caught my eye in the hallway one afternoon and mouthed, "What is happening?" I just shrugged. On Friday, Cameron stopped by my desk. He leaned against the partition, arms crossed, that same smug smile on his face. "Hey, Jasmine. Just wanted to say thanks for all your help these past few months. I know I've learned a lot from you. I think we make a pretty good team, don't you?" I looked up at him and smiled sweetly. "Absolutely, Cameron. I think you're going to do great on Monday." He grinned. "Thanks. I really think this presentation is going to change everything." "Oh," I said, turning back to my screen. "I'm sure it will." He walked away, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Because he was right. Monday's presentation was going to change everything. Just not in the way he thought. The weekend felt like it lasted forever. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I ran through the scenarios in my head. What if someone caught the errors before Monday? What if Cameron actually decided to review the data this time? What if Diane double-checked the files? But then I'd remember the activity logs. The months of theft. The smug look on Cameron's face. And I'd calm down. Because even if this plan failed, at least I'd tried. At least I'd done something other than smile and nod while he destroyed my career. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and drizzle, the kind of Seattle weather that makes everything feel heavy and muted. I got to the office early, made myself a coffee, and sat at my desk like it was any other day. My hands were steady. My face was calm. Inside, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the executive conference room on the 12th floor. I wasn't invited, obviously. But Rhea was. She was part of the operations team, and they always sat in on strategic presentations to assess feasibility. She'd promised to text me updates. At 9:30, I watched Cameron step into the elevator with a leather portfolio and that same overconfident stride. He'd worn his best suit, navy blue with a subtle pinstripe. His hair was freshly cut. He looked like someone who believed he was about to become the company's golden boy. I felt a flicker of something, not quite guilt, but close. Then I remembered the file properties. Last modified by Cameron H_admin. The violation of my account. The months of gaslighting. The flicker disappeared. At 10:03, my phone buzzed. Rhea, he's starting. Confidence level is off the charts. I smiled and got back to work. Or at least, I pretended to. Mostly I just refreshed my email and watched the clock. 10:47, another buzz. Rhea, Jasmine. Something's wrong. Gerald just asked him to explain the competitor analysis slide. Cameron stuttering. My pulse quickened. I typed back, and? Rhea, he said he'd have to double-check the footnotes. Gerald does not look happy. I set my phone down and took a slow breath. It was happening. At 11:20, my phone lit up with a call. Diane. I let it ring 4 times before I answered, keeping my voice light and professional. Hey, Diane. What's up? Her voice was tight, clipped. Jasmine. I need you to come up to the 12th floor. Now. Is everything okay? Just come up. Conference room B. She hung up before I could respond. I stood, smoothed my blouse, grabbed a notepad for effect, and walked to the elevator. My legs felt like they were filled with static, but I kept my face neutral. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, the energy was immediately different. Tense. Cold. I walked into conference room B and found Diane, Gerald, Cameron, and 2 board members I recognized from company photos, Patricia Nguyen, the CFO, and David Thornhill, head of business development. Cameron was sitting at the far end of the table, his face pale and blotchy. His tie was loosened. The leather portfolio sat closed in front of him like a crime scene exhibit. Gerald stood near the window, arms crossed, his jaw set in a way that made him look every bit the ruthless entrepreneur he'd once been. Diane gestured to an empty chair. Sit. I sat. I folded my hands on the table and waited. Patricia spoke first, her tone sharp and clinical. Ms. Rivera. We've just spent the last hour reviewing a presentation that was supposed to outline our growth strategy for Q4 and beyond. The data in that presentation is either incorrect, fabricated, or fundamentally flawed. Can you explain that? I blinked, letting a careful amount of confusion cross my face. I'm sorry, I don't understand. What presentation? Cameron's head snapped up. Don't play dumb, Jasmine. You know exactly what presentation. I turned to him slowly, my expression calm. Cameron, I wasn't aware you were presenting anything today. I wasn't invited to this meeting. Diane cut in. The files Cameron presented were sourced from your shared directory. Your projects. Your analysis. I nodded. I do keep my work on the shared drive, yes. It's company policy. But I'm not sure which files you're referring to. Gerald's voice was low, dangerous. The biotech market analysis. The client retention strategy. The pricing model. All of it was wrong, Jasmine. Completely, catastrophically wrong. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I spoke carefully, like I was piecing something together in real time. I'm sorry, Mr. Holloway, but those files shouldn't have been used for a board presentation. They weren't finalized. Cameron slammed his hand on the table. You labeled them final. You saved them in a folder called Q4_strategy_final. I met his eyes. I label a lot of files that way during my process. It helps me keep versions organized. But those files were drafts. Working documents. I hadn't validated the data yet. I turned to Patricia. If someone had asked me, I would have told them that. Diane's face went red. Why would you put unfinished work in a shared folder? Because it's a shared drive, I said evenly. I use it to back up my work in progress. I didn't realize anyone else was accessing my files without asking me first. The room went silent. Cameron opened his mouth, then closed it. Diane looked at Gerald. Gerald stared at me like he was trying to decide if I was lying. David Thornhill leaned forward. Ms. Rivera, did you give Cameron Holloway permission to use those files? No, sir. I didn't even know he had access to them. Patricia pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. According to the access logs, Cameron's admin account accessed Jasmine's directory 47 times over the past 4 months. She looked up at Gerald. Including this past Friday at 11 p.m. Gerald's expression darkened. He turned to Cameron. You've been logging into her account? Cameron's voice cracked. I didn't think it was a big deal. She's on my team, I thought it was collaborative. You have your own account, Patricia said coldly. Why were you using hers? I just needed reference materials. For 4 months? Diane's voice was shrill now, panicked. She was realizing how bad this looked. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to say anything else. The logs spoke for themselves. Gerald exhaled through his nose, a sound like a tire deflating. Everyone out. Except Cameron. Diane stood immediately. Patricia and David followed. I started to stand, but Gerald held up a hand. Not you, Ms. Rivera. Sit. My stomach dropped, but I lowered back into the chair. Diane hesitated at the door, then left, closing it behind her. It was just the 3 of us now. Gerald, Cameron, and me. Gerald walked slowly to the head of the table and sat down. He looked older suddenly. Tired. He folded his hands and looked at his son. You've been stealing her work. Dad, that's not. Don't. Gerald's voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. I've spent 20 years building this company. I've made sacrifices. I've missed birthdays, anniversaries, family vacations. I did it because I believed in something bigger than myself. And I wanted to leave that to you. He paused. But you can't even do the work yourself. You have to steal it from someone who actually earned her place here. Cameron's face crumpled. I was trying to impress you. By lying? I didn't think. No. You didn't. Gerald turned to me. His eyes were hard, but there was something else there too. Respect, maybe. Or resignation. Ms. Rivera. Did you know those files were wrong? I met his gaze. I thought about lying. About playing innocent all the way through. But something in his expression told me he already knew. So I took a gamble. I told the truth. Yes. Cameron's head whipped toward me, his eyes wide with betrayal. Gerald didn't move. I knew he'd been accessing my account, I continued. I saw the logs 2 weeks ago. And I knew he'd take anything that looked finished. So I gave him exactly what he was looking for. I kept my voice steady. I'm not proud of it. But I was tired of being stolen from. The room was so quiet I could hear the rain against the windows. Gerald leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he opened his eyes and looked at Cameron. You're suspended. Effective immediately. 2 weeks. No pay. You'll clean out your office today. Cameron's mouth fell open. Dad. I said get out. Cameron stood shakily, grabbed his portfolio, and walked to the door. He paused, glanced back at me with a look of pure hatred, then left. Gerald and I sat alone. He rubbed his face with both hands. I should fire you too. I know. But I won't. I waited. Because you're right, he said quietly. And because my son is a thief. And because if I fire you, you'll have one hell of a lawsuit. He looked at me. But we're going to have a conversation about how you handle problems in the future. Understood? I nodded. Understood. He stood and walked to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Ms. Rivera, that retention model you built last quarter, the real one, saved us $500,000. He opened the door. Don't let my son's incompetence make you forget that you're good at what you do. Then he left. I sat there alone in the conference room, my hands trembling now that it was over. I'd won. But it didn't feel like victory yet. It felt like standing on the edge of something, waiting to see if the ground would hold. I walked back to my desk in a daze, my legs moving on autopilot while my brain tried to process what had just happened. The office felt different now, like the air pressure had changed. A few people glanced up as I passed, their expressions curious, maybe concerned. Word traveled fast in open floor plans. Rhea was waiting by my desk, her eyes wide. What happened up there? Cameron just blew past me with a box of his stuff and he looked like he was about to cry. I sat down slowly, my hands still shaking slightly. He's been suspended. Suspended? For what? I looked at her, debating how much to say. But Rhea had been the one who first told me about Cameron stealing my retention model. She'd been the only one who seemed to care. He was accessing my account without permission. Stealing my files. Gerald found out. Rhea's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Jasmine, that's insane. Are you okay? I think so, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. I think I'm still processing. She squeezed my shoulder. You should go home. Seriously. Take the rest of the day. But I didn't go home. I couldn't. Something told me this wasn't over yet, that leaving now would make me look guilty or weak or like I was hiding. So I stayed. I opened my laptop and tried to focus on actual work, the real biotech analysis that still needed to be finished, the one with accurate data and sound recommendations. Around 2 p.m., Diane appeared at my desk. Her face was drawn, her usual confidence replaced with something brittle. Jasmine. My office. Please. I followed her to the small glass-walled room she called an office, really just a slightly bigger cubicle with a door. She closed it behind us and gestured for me to sit. I did. She stayed standing, pacing slightly, her arms crossed. I want to understand what happened, she said finally. Gerald told me Cameron was accessing your account. Why didn't you come to me about that? I kept my voice measured. I did come to you, Diane. 3 months ago, when Cameron took credit for my retention model. You told me not to make it a bigger issue than it needed to be. She flinched. That was different. That was about presentation credit, not account access. It was about a pattern, I said quietly. A pattern of him taking my work and you protecting him. So when I found the logs, I didn't think coming to you again would change anything. Diane stopped pacing. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw something like guilt flicker across her face. I was trying to keep the peace. Gerald wanted Cameron integrated into the team, and I thought if I just managed it carefully, everyone could coexist. You managed it by sacrificing me. She didn't argue. She just looked away. What you did, feeding him those files, that was sabotage, Jasmine. You have to see how that looks. And what he did, stealing months of my work, violating my account security, that was what? Professional development? Diane pressed her lips together. Gerald's not firing you. I think you know how lucky that is. Lucky, I repeated, tasting the word. It was bitter. I'm lucky that after being stolen from for months, I'm allowed to keep the job I earned. I'm just saying, you should be careful going forward. People are going to be watching you now. I stood up. Let them watch. At least they'll actually see me this time. I left her office before she could respond. My hands were steady now. The fear had burned away, replaced by something sharper. Anger, yes, but also clarity. The rest of the afternoon crawled by. I could feel eyes on me, whispered conversations stopping when I walked past the break room. By 4 p.m., an email appeared in my inbox from HR, subject, meeting request, Thursday 9 a.m. I wasn't surprised. I forwarded it to my personal email, just in case, and then I did something I should have done weeks ago. I called a lawyer. Her name was Nina Castillo, and she specialized in employment law. I'd found her website during one of my sleepless nights after discovering Cameron's access logs. I explained everything over the phone, the stolen work, the account violations, the retaliation I was likely facing. She listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you still have the access logs? The screenshots?" "Yes. On a USB drive at home." "Good. Don't bring it to the office. Make copies and send one to me. As for the HR meeting, you're allowed to have representation. I'll come with you." The relief I felt was almost physical. "Thank you. One more thing, Jasmine. What you did, creating those fake files, that complicates things. It could be argued as retaliatory misconduct." My stomach tightened. "So I'm screwed either way?" "Not necessarily. If they were going to fire you for that, Gerald would have done it this morning. The fact that he didn't suggests he knows the optics are worse for them than for you. But you need to be smart from here on out. Document everything. Don't engage with Cameron if he contacts you. And don't talk about this with anyone at work except in official settings." I promised I would. That night, I went home and made copies of everything. The logs, the screenshots, the emails from Diane, even the timestamps on my original files proving I'd created them months before Cameron's versions. I sent a full set to Nina and kept another hidden in my apartment. Wednesday was quieter. Cameron's desk sat empty, his nameplate already removed. A few people asked me what happened, carefully, like they were testing the waters. I kept my answers vague. There was a misunderstanding about file access. HR is handling it. But not everyone was subtle. Around lunchtime, I was heating up leftovers in the break room when Tyler Brennan, one of the junior analysts who'd always seemed a little too friendly with Cameron, walked in. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, smirking. "So you got Cameron suspended, huh? That's pretty cold." I didn't look at him. "I didn't get him suspended. He got himself suspended." "That's not what I heard. I heard you set him up. Fed him bad data on purpose." I turned to face him. "And where did you hear that?" He shrugged. "People talk. Then people should get their facts straight," I said evenly. "Cameron accessed my account without permission for 4 months. That's a fireable offense at any company. What happened after that is between him, Gerald, and HR. Tyler's smirk faded slightly. Still. Pretty ruthless. No, I said, grabbing my food from the microwave. Ruthless would have been going to a lawyer first and suing the company for fostering a hostile work environment. I'm actually being pretty generous. I walked out before he could respond, but my hands were shaking again. Not from fear. From rage. The fact that people like Tyler existed, people who would defend a thief just because he had the right last name, made me want to scream. Thursday morning arrived too fast. I met Nina in the lobby at 8:45. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes and an immaculate black suit. She shook my hand firmly. Ready? As I'll ever be. The HR meeting was held in a small windowless room on the third floor. Present were Diane, a woman from HR named Laura Fitzgerald whom I'd only met during onboarding, and, unexpectedly, Patricia Nguyen, the CFO. Nina sat beside me, her notepad open, her pen poised. Laura started with the standard preamble. This was an informal conversation to clarify recent events and ensure everyone was aligned moving forward. Then she turned to me. Jasmine, can you walk us through your decision to create inaccurate files and place them in a location where Cameron Holloway would access them? Nina held up a hand before I could speak. Before my client answers that, I'd like clarification on the company's policies regarding unauthorized account access and data theft. Laura blinked. I'm sorry. Ms. Rivera's account was accessed 47 times over 4 months by someone other than herself, without her knowledge or consent. That's a violation of your own cybersecurity policies, not to mention potentially illegal under federal computer fraud statutes. I'd like to know what steps Meridian is taking to address that. Diane shifted uncomfortably. Patricia leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Ms. Castillo, we're aware of the access issues. Cameron has been disciplined. Suspended, Nina corrected. Not terminated. Not reported to authorities. Suspended with what I assume will be a quiet return in 2 weeks. Laura's face reddened. That's an internal personnel matter. And so is this meeting, Nina said smoothly. So let's be clear about what we're actually discussing here. You're considering disciplining my client for protecting her intellectual work from ongoing theft. Meanwhile, the person who committed that theft, who violated company policy and possibly federal law, is getting a slap on the wrist because of his last name. Does that about sum it up? The room went silent. Diane looked like she wanted to disappear. Patricia's jaw tightened, but there was something almost approving in her eyes. Laura cleared her throat. We're not here to assign blame. Good, Nina said. Then we're done. My client has documentation proving months of intellectual property theft. She has evidence of unauthorized account access. And she has a paper trail of complaints that were ignored by management. She closed her notebook. If Meridian would like to pursue any disciplinary action against Ms. Rivera, we'll be happy to discuss it in front of an employment tribunal. Otherwise, I suggest we all move forward professionally. Patricia stood. Ms. Rivera. Ms. Castillo. Thank you for your time. Laura, Diane, a word. We were dismissed. I followed Nina out into the hallway, my heart pounding. When we reached the lobby, she turned to me and smiled. You're going to be fine. How do you know? Because they know they screwed up. And because Patricia Nguyen is smart enough to see a lawsuit coming from a mile away. She handed me her card. Call me if anything changes. But I think you just won. I watched her leave, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope. Back at my desk, an email was waiting. From Patricia Nguyen directly. Subject line, conversation. I opened it. Ms. Rivera, please come see me when you have a moment. 12th floor, corner office. I took the elevator up, my stomach in knots. Patricia's office was 3 times the size of Diane's, with actual walls and a view of the Space Needle. She gestured for me to sit. That was quite a meeting, she said. I'm sorry if. She held up a hand. Don't apologize. You protected yourself. That's smart. She leaned back in her chair. Gerald and I have been talking. Cameron's not coming back after his suspension. We're calling it a mutual departure, but between you and me, he's done. I tried to keep my face neutral, but relief flooded through me. Patricia continued. We're also restructuring the analytics department. Diane is being moved to a different division. We need someone to lead the team, someone who actually understands the work. She paused. Interested? I stared at her. You're offering me Diane's job. I'm offering you the chance to interview for it. But yes. She smiled slightly. Consider it an apology. The interview happened the following week, and it felt surreal sitting across from Patricia and two other senior leaders, answering questions about team management and strategic vision when just days ago I'd been fighting to keep my job. But I'd spent 4 years doing the work, learning the systems, building the relationships. I knew the answers because I'd lived them. They offered me the position that Friday. Lead analyst, with a 28% raise and my own actual office with walls and a door that locked. I accepted, obviously, but the victory felt strange. Hollow in some ways, like I'd won a battle I never wanted to fight in the first place. My first day in the new role was a Monday, 3 weeks after Cameron's suspension had become his permanent exit. I arrived early and found my new office already set up, my name on a placard outside the door. Jasmine Rivera, lead data analyst. I ran my fingers over the letters and felt something crack open inside me. Not happiness exactly. More like relief. Proof that I wasn't disposable after all. The team meeting that morning was awkward. Everyone knew what had happened, even if they didn't know all the details. Rhea gave me an encouraging smile from across the table. Tyler Brennan avoided eye contact entirely. I kept my remarks brief and professional. I wasn't here to gloat or rehash the past. I was here to do the job I should have been doing all along. But not everyone was ready to move on. That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a long moment, my jaw clenched. Cameron. I should have blocked it. Should have ignored it. But something in me couldn't let it go unanswered. I typed back, you destroyed your own life when you decided stealing was easier than working. I just made sure people saw it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, my dad won't even talk to me. I'm living in my girlfriend's studio apartment. I can't get a job anywhere because everyone in this industry knows what happened. I read it twice, waiting for the guilt to come. The sympathy. Some small part of me that would feel bad for him. It didn't come. Instead, I thought about the bus shelter. The trash bag. The 3 years of silence when my family erased me. I thought about every late night I'd worked while Cameron took credit. Every time I'd swallowed my anger to keep the peace. I typed, I slept in a storage room and rebuilt my career from nothing while you had every advantage handed to you. You'll survive. But you'll have to do it the way the rest of us do, by actually earning it. I blocked the number before he could respond. Then I deleted the thread and got back to work. Over the next month, things settled into a new rhythm. I rebuilt the analytics team structure, reassigning projects based on actual skills rather than politics. I implemented new security protocols for file access, something that should have existed from the beginning. I even hired 2 new analysts, both women, both brilliant, both people I knew would never get the credit they deserved unless someone like me was there to make sure they did. Rhea became my unofficial second-in-command. She had a mind for process improvement that I'd always admired, and together we streamlined our entire reporting system. The biotech pitch I'd been working on, the real one with accurate data, landed us the contract. A $4.7 million deal over 3 years. Patricia mentioned it in the quarterly all-hands meeting and specifically credited our team. It felt good. Not vindicating exactly, but good. But the real shift happened on a Thursday afternoon in late November. I was in my office reviewing budget projections when my assistant, a cheerful guy named Marcus knocked on my door. "Someone here to see you. Says it's personal." I frowned. "Do they have an appointment?" "No, but, well, she says she's your sister." My entire body went cold. I hadn't spoken to anyone in my family in almost 6 years. Not since the night I was kicked out with a trash bag and a note. I'd built my entire adult life in the vacuum they'd left behind, and now suddenly one of them was here. "Tell her I'm in a meeting," I started to say, but then I stopped. Because running felt like giving them power again. Like letting them dictate my life from a distance. I took a breath. "Actually, give me 2 minutes. Then send her in." Marcus nodded and disappeared. I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and tried to prepare myself for whatever this was. When the door opened again, I barely recognized her. Alexis. My younger sister. She'd been 12 the last time I saw her, all braces and soccer jerseys. Now she was 18, taller, her hair darker, her face sharper. But her eyes were the same. Scared and searching. "Jasmine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure you'd see me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit." She did, clutching a worn backpack in her lap like a shield. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I found you through LinkedIn. I'd been following your career for 2 years, but I didn't know how to reach out. I thought you'd hate me." "I don't hate you," I said, and I realized it was true. "You were a kid. None of it was your fault." Her eyes filled with tears. "I tried to tell them. After you left. I asked Mom where you went, and she said you made your choice. But I knew that wasn't true. I heard them talking that night. I heard Dad yelling about the car and Nathan crying. I knew you didn't do it." Something in my chest tightened. "Why are you here, Alexis?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Because I'm 18 now. And they're doing the same thing to me. Not exactly the same, but close enough. Nathan's the golden child. I'm just in the way. And I graduate high school in 6 months, and I don't know what to do. I don't have anyone." I stared at her, this girl who was practically a stranger but also the only person who shared my blood and maybe understood what it felt like to be invisible in your own family. I thought about turning her away. About protecting the life I'd built by keeping the past locked out. But then I remembered what it felt like to be 17 and desperate and alone. "Do you have a place to stay?" I asked. She nodded. "For now. I'm with a friend. But her parents are only letting me stay through the end of the semester." I pulled out a business card and wrote my personal cell number on the back. "Here. That's my direct line. I can't promise I'll fix everything, but I can help you figure out what's next. College applications, job searching, whatever you need." She took the card like it was made of glass. "Why would you help me? After everything?" "Because someone should have helped me," I said simply. "And because you're not them. You're just trying to survive, same as I was." She started crying in earnest then, and I came around the desk and let her hug me, this girl I barely knew who wore my face and carried the same scars. When she finally pulled away, she said, "Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever pay you back." "You don't have to," I said. "Just break the cycle. That's enough." After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the city lights coming on below as the sun set over Puget Sound. I thought about everything that had led me here. The betrayals, the fights, the tiny victories that had slowly built into something bigger. I thought about Cameron, wherever he was now, probably still blaming me for his failures. I thought about Gerald, trying to salvage his company's reputation while mourning the son he'd wanted his son to be. But mostly I thought about the girl I'd been at 17, sleeping on cardboard in a storage room, convinced she'd never amount to anything because that's what everyone had told her. I wished I could go back and tell her the truth, that she was stronger than she knew, that the people who underestimated her were wrong, and that one day she'd have an office with her name on the door and the power to help someone else the way no one had helped her. My phone buzzed. A text from Ria: "Drinks tonight? You've earned it." I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely." As I packed up my laptop and turned off the lights, I paused at the door and looked back at my office one last time. On my desk sat a small succulent plant Patricia had given me as a congratulations gift. Next to it was a framed photo of me at the Chamber of Commerce Awards ceremony from 2 years ago, the same event that had brought my old life crashing back into my new one. But there was something else there too, something I'd added just last week. A sticky note, written in my own handwriting: "You were never the spare. You were always the whole damn story." I'd started keeping it there as a reminder on the hard days, the ones where imposter syndrome crept in or when I questioned whether I really deserved this role. But looking at it now, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I knew who I was. I knew what I'd survived. And I knew that everything I had, I'd earned. Cameron had stolen my work, but he couldn't steal my worth. My family had abandoned me, but they couldn't erase my existence. And everyone who'd underestimated me had only made me stronger. I turned off the light and walked out, leaving the sticky note behind. Because some reminders are only necessary until you finally believe them. And I believed. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, riding down to the lobby where Ria was waiting. Tomorrow I'd meet with Alexis again and help her navigate college applications. Next week I'd present our Q4 strategy to the board, using real data and real insights that no one could take credit for but me. Next month I'd probably face some new challenge, some new person who thought I was an easy target. But tonight, I was going to celebrate. Not because I'd gotten revenge on Cameron, though there was some satisfaction in that. And not because I'd gotten promoted, though that was meaningful too. I was celebrating because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all: the best response to being underestimated isn't anger or bitterness or even revenge. It's becoming undeniable. And that's exactly what I'd done. The night air hit my face as I walked out of the building, cool and sharp and full of possibility. Ria waved from across the street, and I jogged over to meet her, my heels clicking against the pavement, my head held high. Behind me, the Meridian Tech building stood tall against the darkening sky, all glass and steel and ambition. Somewhere up on the 12th floor, my office light was off, but my name was still there, permanent and undeniable. I'd started with nothing and built everything. And no one, not Cameron, not my family, not anyone, could ever take that away. Because I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't even a survivor. I was the author of my own story. And this chapter? This chapter had a happy ending. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.